The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting soft golden hues across the counter. The sound of sizzling eggs was interrupted by the unmistakable buzz of Emily's phone vibrating on the table. She glanced at it, hesitated for a moment, and quickly swiped it away. Her husband, Daniel, who had been busy making coffee, noticed the fleeting motion but said nothing. It had been like this for weeks, small, subtle changes in her behavior that at first felt insignificant but slowly added up. Daniel had always been the kind of man who prided himself on his ability to trust. He trusted his friends, his co-workers, and most importantly, he trusted Emily. They had been together for 15 years, married for 10, and in all that time, he had never once questioned her loyalty. But lately, something was different. Emily was quieter, more distracted. She came home later from work, spent more time on her phone, and sometimes when he spoke to her, it felt like she wasn't really listening. He didn't want to believe it. He loved her. He wanted to believe their bond was strong enough to withstand anything, that the life they had built together, filled with laughter, shared memories, and love, was solid and unbreakable. But that quiet, persistent unease in the pit of his stomach grew stronger every day. Something had shifted, and the growing distance between them was impossible to ignore. It wasn't until he stumbled upon an unexpected detail that his growing concerns turned into full-fledged suspicion. One evening, while she was in the shower, Daniel was putting away the laundry when he noticed a name in the contact list on her phone. Ben. He recognized the name. Ben was one of Emily's colleagues, someone she spoke about from time to time, but never with the enthusiasm she used when talking about other friends. Daniel shrugged it off at first, telling himself he was just being paranoid, but the feeling of unease refused to let go. The next day, Emily was once again running late for work. She had a habit of leaving early, often with little explanation for where she was going. This time, Daniel decided to follow his gut. He waited until she left the house. Then, without thinking too much about it, he grabbed his car keys and followed her. He was careful not to be seen, keeping a safe distance as he watched her pull into a quiet cafe in the downtown area. As he parked across the street, Daniel saw her meet Ben at a table, and their interaction was anything but casual. She was laughing, leaning in toward him in a way that made Daniel's heart race with both confusion and dread. He couldn't hear their conversation, but the body language was unmistakable. It was intimate, something that went beyond mere friendship. Daniel sat in his car for what felt like hours, his mind racing as he replayed every moment of their relationship. Had he missed the signs all along? Was his marriage, the one he had always believed was built on trust and understanding, just an illusion? When Emily finally left, Daniel followed her back home, trying to gather his thoughts. His heart was heavy, but a part of him knew that the conversation he had been avoiding for weeks was inevitable now. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Daniel couldn't ignore the weight of the silence between them. He pushed his plate aside and looked Emily in the eyes, his voice steady, but laced with the pain he couldn't hide. "Emily, is there something you need to tell me?" Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment, Daniel saw something like fear flash across her face before she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "What do you mean?" "I saw you today," Daniel said quietly, "at the cafe with Ben." A long silence followed. Emily's face paled, and she opened her mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Daniel, I never wanted you to find out this way." The confession came out in broken sentences, each one heavier than the last. She admitted to the emotional affair, explaining that she had become disconnected from him over the years. She felt ignored, unappreciated, and in her own words, lost. The attention she had received from Ben had filled a void she hadn't known how to communicate to her husband. What had started as innocent conversations had escalated into something more, something Emily deeply regretted but didn't know how to undo. Daniel listened in silence, his heart breaking with every word. He couldn't understand how it had come to this, but he couldn't deny the truth of her words. He had been neglectful in his own way, consumed by work, responsibilities, and his own routines. He had failed to see the cracks in their relationship until it was too late. But what hurt most was the betrayal, the trust they had built over the years shattered in an instant. The conversation was raw and painful, but it was necessary. They both sat in the aftermath of the confession, unsure of what the future held. Emily was devastated by the pain she had caused, and Daniel was torn between his love for her and the betrayal that felt impossible to overcome. But despite the pain, there was a glimmer of hope. Neither of them had given up on their marriage entirely. They both knew that rebuilding would take time, effort, and complete transparency on her part. She agreed, but her nightmare was far from over. Emily, for her part, had thought that the affair, though emotionally heavy, could somehow remain a secret, a private part of her life. What she didn't anticipate was how her actions would ripple through her life. Word of her affair reached her workplace, where relationships with colleagues grew strained. Her reputation suffered, and the once friendly dynamics she had at work turned cold. Ben, too, revealed his true colors, distancing himself when things became complicated, leaving Emily to face the fallout alone. The isolation Emily felt grew. The support system she had once relied on was crumbling, and yet at the same time, there was a strange sense of clarity. Emily began to see things from a new perspective. Her own decisions had caused these consequences, but there was also a part of her that felt relief. For the first time in a long while, she was no longer living in denial. She knew what she had done wrong, and though the path to redemption was unclear, she was determined to take it. For Daniel, the emotional toll was crushing. He had never known how deeply betrayal could cut. The hardest part, he realized, wasn't just the affair itself. It was the loss of something sacred. He had trusted Emily with everything, and she had broken that trust. But as the days passed, he realized he couldn't let this define him, nor could he allow it to destroy his family. He sought therapy, a decision he initially resisted, but one that ultimately opened a door to understanding his own feelings and responses. Through counseling, Daniel learned that while Emily had made a grave mistake, it didn't have to mark the end of their relationship. It could be a turning point, a moment that could bring them closer if they were willing to do the work. Emily, too, sought therapy. She needed to understand why she had strayed, why she had sought validation in someone else when she should have turned to her husband. Therapy helped her face her own insecurities and pain, and it guided her in the difficult task of reestablishing trust. She realized how much she had neglected her marriage, how much she had taken for granted, and how she needed to become more open, more vulnerable with Daniel if they were to heal. The couple began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. They spent more time together, starting small with quiet evenings, long conversations, and shared moments of intimacy that had once seemed ordinary. They reconnected through hobbies, traveling to places that held sentimental value to them both, and revisiting the reasons they had fallen in love in the first place. It wasn't easy, but they were committed to taking it one step at a time. Daniel was learning how to be more emotionally available, and Emily was working on her own emotional transparency. Over the following months, their relationship transformed. The tension that had once defined their home began to fade, replaced by an atmosphere of healing and understanding. They rediscovered the joy of simply being together, no longer weighed down by the unresolved bitterness of the past. Yet even as they moved forward, both of them carried the scars of their experience. The affair had left its mark, but it had also taught them valuable lessons. They both learned the importance of communication, vulnerability, and emotional honesty in their relationship. It was a hard-earned wisdom, but one that would serve them in the years to come. They began to look at their marriage not as something fragile, but as something worth fighting for. They acknowledged that they weren't perfect, but that didn't mean they couldn't be better together. They set new boundaries and worked harder to create a healthy, loving dynamic that would be the foundation of their future. Their children, too, felt the effects of the tension between their parents. Daniel and Emily made a conscious effort to shield them from the worst of it, but the cracks in their relationship were evident. It was hard for the kids not to notice the late nights spent talking, the emotional distance that seemed to grow and shrink with each passing day. But with time, they saw their parents working through their issues, striving to rebuild what had been broken. The family began to heal together, slowly but surely. Months passed, and though the scars remained, Emily and Daniel found a new rhythm in their marriage. Trust was a slow-growing plant, but it began to take root again. Emily proved herself by consistently being transparent, by doing the small things that showed her commitment to making amends. Daniel, too, worked on being more present, more attuned to her needs, and more patient as they both navigated the challenges of healing. They never truly forgot what had happened, but they learned to forgive. It was a difficult, ongoing process, but it was one that ultimately allowed them to move forward. Their marriage, though forever changed, had a new sense of strength, one built on the lessons of their past and their commitment to a better future. And though their journey was not without its hurdles, they found new beginnings in the very place they had once thought irreparably broken. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was their ending, a testament to love, resilience, and the power of second chances. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that explores the complexities of relationships and personal growth. Thank you for joining me on this journey.